Hello and welcome to this new episode of Bootstrapping Your Dreams show. Today we'll be talking with Bob Friday. So Bob is the Group Vice President and Chief AI Officer and CTO Enterprise at Juniper Networks. Juniper Networks is a $10.3 billion company with over 11,000 employees from 50 plus countries. Juniper Networks is leading the revolution in networking, serving a range of customers, including top 100 global service providers, global Fortune 100, and 30,000 other enterprises. Bob also co-founded Mist Systems, a startup with 27.2 million in revenue, which focused on building a machine learning platform in the cloud to help enterprises put business-critical mobile experiences on the wireless networks. He has been recognized as a Wi-Fi industry leader and contributed to HS 2.0 industry standard. Bob holds over 15 patents and has a wealth of experience in the wireless industry, having worked at Metricom and co-founded Airspace, a startup focused on helping enterprises manage the flood of employees bringing unlicensed Wi-Fi technology into their business. Cisco acquired Airspace in 2005 for $450 million, where Bob became the vice president and CTO of Cisco Enterprise Mobility and drove mobility strategy and investments in wireless business. Welcome, Bob.
For having it's good to be here and good to talk to everyone.
Absolutely. So you've had such a tremendous success in your career, and we went over a few of your accomplishments, but can you take us down the memory lane and help us get to know your story? How did you start? How did you arrive at this level of success? What was that journey like?
Yeah, I tell people, so I send a Christmas card to the FCC every year, because my journey kind of started when the FCC came out with these unlicensed spectrum rules, right? And these are the rules that basically BLE, Wi-Fi are based on. That was back in the 80s, mid 80s or so. So if I look back in my career, I've built a whole career on top of these new rules, and that adventure really started with, you mentioned Metricom, and Metricom was kind of my very first startup. That was basically meter reading, that was the original venture. And then we kind of pivoted when the internet came out. Then we pivoted into the theory of let's connect all these laptops up to the internet. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of the first pivot of, let's go build a wireless network for laptops. Now, I would tell you that the lesson I learned back then, wireless networking wasn't a bad thought, but it was a much better thought when the iPhone came out. So that was the first lesson I learned about market timing. So we were building big wireless mesh networks, and my standard joke is my legacy to mankind. If you drive around and you see little white boxes hanging on streetlights, those will be around a lot longer than I will. So that was kind of that was my first startup adventure, building wireless mesh networks for the internet. And that venture went public. That was my first IPO. Taking a company public venture. And then that adventure spun out into this Airspace adventure. And as you mentioned, right, that adventure was all about back in the, what year was that? 2000. That was back in Wi-Fi was just becoming a must-have. People were bringing their laptops into work. Apple was putting Wi-Fi into their MacBooks. And that's when all of a sudden, hey, no, there's an opportunity really to take what we did at Metricom, and help these enterprises manage all these wireless users that they're, because for me, it looked like a service provider, right? These enterprise guys were starting to look like service providers. So that was kind of the beginnings of the Airspace adventure. And there's a lot of lessons learned in my first, we can go over what I learned in that adventure, raising money. That was my first, let's go raise money adventure. That eventually we sold to Cisco. And that's what I learned, Cisco was my first big company adventure, right? That was when I went from kind of a startup and the lesson I learned there, and I tell people is, in startups, you're always running out of money. It's like if you have a year's worth of money in the bank, you're happy. At Cisco, I had some product manager tell me that they were going to delay something for like 2 quarters. HR told me I overreacted, because it took me a while to realize that if you're in a big company, they're not worried about running out of money. If you're in a startup, you're worried about running out of money. Big companies, you delay something for 2 quarters, not a big deal. So that was my first big company venture. And then I went off and started Mist, so I went back to my startup adventure, and that was really, looking for a new opportunity to change wireless network, which, you think it doesn't happen often in your career where you get to do do the same thing twice, right? So Mist was basically Airspace 2.0 of like, let's take another shot at re-architecting this wireless networking space. Amazing, and now I'm at Juniper as a, and when I started my career, I didn't have any clue that I would end up as a chief AI officer. 20 years ago, AI wasn't even around 20 years ago.
Absolutely. Amazing journey. Yeah. I mean, one thing I noticed is like, I think we talked about this in our previous conversation as well. Like, it's about looking for those opportunities, as you said, like the rules change for the wireless spectrum, and it's being, of course, it's being at the right time at the right place, but being observant and looking for those opportunities and jumping onto it. So what was going on in your mind, like in terms of taking risk or jumping into something that was unknown? It seems like you have been doing that consistently in your career. So how's that feeling? Like, how do you assess opportunities? How do you find these opportunities?
Yeah, I think we discussed this, right? Risk is one of those individual, it's like wine, everyone has a different tolerance to risk. I never really saw myself as a risk taker, but looking back on it, I did take risk when I saw that there was an opportunity to do something new. If I look what happened at Metricom, I started that adventure as a software engineer. Somewhere along the way, we were in the middle of the startup. We were trying to build radios that hang off streetlights. There was no radios. And that's when I took the risk of becoming an RF engineer. Now that became out of necessity, right? Because there was no one else in the company. And that's when I tried and transformed myself from being a software engineer to actually learning to build radios, right? If you ever come to my house, the interesting thing is I've got a whole bookshelf of every possible book you could buy on RF 20 years ago. Now, nowadays you don't do that. Nowadays, you want to learn something, you go to the internet and find it on the internet. 20 years ago, you went and bought a book at Stanford if you wanted to figure out to learn something. Okay. So I would say that risk, learning yourself and risk tolerance, and making sure you're not in too much debt. I mean, the other thing I've found when knowing people is the less debt you have, the more risk you can take, right? Yeah. If you have big house payments and everything, you can't afford to take much risk.
Absolutely. So as you said, like, taking risk is one thing, but then acting upon it and gathering the information, as you said, like in the past, even I look at my career, I used to have to buy books about all these topics that I needed to learn. But today, as you said, the information is everywhere. So what will be your advice for somebody who's looking to make it big and fulfill their dreams? How has the environment changed for them today?
Yeah, the interesting thing is, like, I went to Georgia Tech and I'm helping out. Now Georgia, what I tell people is, like, when you're back in college and you're young, you're trying to figure out, are you an entrepreneur at heart? Because not everyone is an entrepreneur at heart. But the interesting thing is, these colleges now, you have the opportunity. Georgia Tech, they have this Create X program where I think 20% of all the students now go through this entrepreneurial training. So, one of my advice is, hey, if you're young and in college, that is a time to kind of explore to see whether or not you're an entrepreneur, blank sheet of paper at heart. So I see the opportunities a lot, for the next generation of entrepreneurs. There's just a lot more opportunities for them to figure this out in the early days, and a lot more people willing to help, a lot more angels willing to help young entrepreneurs figure things out.
Yeah, and so that's very encouraging that people are going through entrepreneurship training and they are learning. But you have been so successful consistently. Like, you created all these startups and they were successful beyond sort of the imagination of a normal person. So have you had some failures as well in your life? And if so, like, what was that story like, and what did you learn from that?
I would say, for me, I've been relatively lucky. I've done three, between Metricom, Aerospace, and Mist. They've all been, Metricom went public, sold Aerospace, sold Mist. That has been successful. I would say Metricom actually, did not survive the crash, the internet crash, right? What I learned out of that adventure, that was my first adventure. That is what I learned, you guys. If you're in a startup, you need high IQ executive teams, right? Because if you're in a big company and you make a $20-30 million mistake, it's not that big of a deal, right? They write it off and they move on. If you're in a startup, you don't have much room for error. You make a $20-30 million mistake, that you probably are not going to survive those mistakes. Absolutely. So I would say that was the first thing. So when I went from aerospace, when I went from Metricom to aerospace, one of the things I made sure was making sure we had high IQ executive teams. Because there's always a couple of you usually live or die by a couple of critical decisions in a startup.
So now that's a very, very interesting point, because any company, any organization, startup or large corporation, basically the true capital is the human capital, right? I have interviewed thousands of people in my career, hired thousands of them, but what is your philosophy of finding the right person? Because a high IQ person can also be like, come in with a big ego or some other kind of traits that may not be as helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone who has done startups or businesses, I've had my fair share of mishires. I found that, the best thing to do on hiring is because it's hard to get to know someone in a couple of interviews, right? Now I would say for like Mist and Aerospace, for Mist, a lot of the first 20 or 30 people we hired were people we knew. Right. These are people we know, but if you're hiring someone that you really don't know, have worked with before, I think the trick is to crowdsource it. You want to basically get, this person to talk to different viewpoints. And I found most mishires are the result of not listening to your fellow friends, right? I have one experience where we mishired a VP of engineering. And everyone knew it was kind of a mistake, but we went ahead and did it because we had a theory that it was going to help somehow. Sure enough, it was a mistake.
Yeah, that gut feeling is very strong. It's generally it's always right, that gut feel, isn't it?
Yeah, crowdsourcing. I think the wisdom of the crowd. That's the theory. You get enough people to weigh in on something. Usually, the wisdom of the crowd is a good rule.
Yeah. So let's talk about technology now. You've had such a tremendous impact on the networking aspect of technology, and now you're working on AI. Where do you see technology going now? Because I talk to a lot of startup founders. They say, hey, pretty much everything is saturated. Whatever opportunities they were to be grabbed, they have been grabbed. So they try to look for very incremental improvements in the status quo. But there are only a few people who say, okay, let's change something dramatically, something drastic. Like, where do you see the technology is? Are there opportunities, big opportunities, or is it like only incremental changes we can do now?
Well, I usually break this up into if I look what happened at Aerospace, that was a new market opportunity. Wi-Fi was relatively new. You were basically, it was a race to who's going to become dominant in the Wi-Fi space. If I look at Mist, we were basically going into a mature market, right? Cisco, Aruba. It's like, you guys, a lot of my investors, like, guys, does the market really need another wireless networking company? But the big architectural change was cloud AI. So if in that case, there was if you're going into a mature market, you have to really be coming out with a big architectural change. That's going to be hard for the big guys to keep up with. I would say AI, if I look back in my career, what was happening, between wireless, cellular, I think that was a big transition. I built a whole career on this unlicensed wireless stuff. Cellular, this whole career was built on cellular. I mean, the internet, there's whole Amazon, that was a big transition. I think AI is another one of these big transitions. And I think anybody who's played with open chat, you see all this open, it's like you guys, it's amazing when you see what it's going to be possible when these models get big enough and with enough data. I don't know if you played with, I mean, I assume you played with open chat.
Yeah, absolutely. We are doing a lot of impactful work with it. It's mind-blowing stuff.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, this AI stuff is, you look at cellular internet 20-year adventures. I think we're just at the beginnings of a 20-year adventure transition right now with this AI stuff.
Yeah. So that's very interesting because I'm very passionate about AI myself, and I also believe it's going to change a lot of things. But what are your projections? Like, a lot of people say, hey, AI is not good. Even people like Elon Musk say, hey, we got to be careful with this AI stuff. What are your views? Like, what are the pros and cons? Where do you see, how do you see humanity being impacted by this technology?
Yeah, I mean, I think AI is slightly, so we have these discussions all day. What's the difference between AI and all this other complex software? We've been doing complex software for years. I would say the thing about AI, it does change. Most stuff we've done in the past, you build a product, it does the same behavior day in, day out. The thing with this AI stuff, it changes behavior, right? So when you deploy it on day one, it may, ideally it's getting better, not worse, but that's part of the problem, right? In some cases it may get worse. If we look what's happening with this open chat stuff, it's replacing a lot of jobs right now. I mean, and I think that's the other thing people are, are we headed to the Star Trek? Most of these technology transitions, they've eliminated jobs, but they've created more new jobs than they've eliminated. I think people are worried, are we getting to that tipping point? That may not be true anymore. We may be actually eliminating jobs and not creating more new jobs. So I think that's one of the cons that we have to keep it as a society, have to keep an eye on, because we may be at a tipping point there. If I think of other cons, I mean, there's so many pros to what AI is doing right now in terms of helping doctors make better diagnosis. It's hard to argue with that. I mean, I guess I want my doctor to make better diagnosis, right? I want him to use this technology to make a better diagnosis. We want our cars. I mean, I see a day where it's going to be illegal to drive a car, right? You can kind of see the day coming where, hey, the autonomous car is going to have a better safety record than human drivers. You kind of see that coming. Okay, guys, are we going to let people keep driving when we know it's a safety issue? I think those are the type of things society is going to have to deal with going forward.
So those are very interesting projections, and I completely agree with most of them. What about this fear of job loss? Because a lot of people resist using technology or even adopting technology, and they discourage other people to adopt technology because they are afraid of losing the job or whatever they are doing. Yesterday, I was talking to a lawyer, and they were scared that their legal firm may be in jeopardy because now AI can advise better their clients than the actual trained lawyers. So, what are your views on mitigating these issues, or at least putting them to ease so that people can actually adopt these technologies?
Yeah, on the ease, I would say historically, new technologies almost always brought more jobs than they eliminated. I mean, so historically, that's kind of hey guys, relax. AI is not going to magically, it's not going to be any different than any other technologies we have. Now, on the flip side, I look at this and I go, well, this may be different. We may have to deal with a society where, if AI starts doing tasks on par with humans, we may actually be in a situation where, that Star Trek society of, guys, we have more people than we have jobs going forward because we've automated so much of, automated so much of the daily tasks going on. So I agree with you. It's something society has to keep an eye on, and and there may be some transformations in society with all the automation happening.
Awesome. So let's also talk about how AI, because a lot of people just see AI as being this robot, like they depict it in the Hollywood movies, but you are working on AI inside, behind the scenes, inside the networks and all that. So can you share with us, obviously, just at the high level, like what exactly, to showcase the implications of AI in so many broad areas, how you are implementing AI, optimizing networks, optimizing uh, bandwidth, however you are implementing it, so that I want people to understand that AI is not just about, creating a human looking robot, or it's not just about chatbots. It's much, much deeper than that.
Yeah, in the case of networking, what we're doing with this AI is, trying. Hang on here, let me get my light. There we go. Um, in the case of us, right, we're trying to build something that does something on par with a IT network domain expert. Now, if you look what these domain experts do, like when our Zoom has a problem, there's a lot of between the wireless radio, the switch, the router, the WAN provider, the cloud provider. There's a lot of things between you and me on this call right now that have to happen.
Yeah.
The fact that we're even here is amazing when you think about all the things that have to happen.
Yeah.
It takes that's where AI ML does a much better job of going through tons of log files and data.
Mhm.
We're not doing anything different than what the human would do. It's just you're doing it much faster, and you're correlating problems. Like when we have a bad experience, if it's because of some configuration on a router on the other side of the network, it could take a human several hours to track down that root cause.
Yeah.
These AI ML algorithms can do that in seconds and minutes now. So that's where we're using what we call and sometimes I try to differentiate between deep learning and ML.
Mhm.
Because the other thing is ML has been around for so long, right? We've all been
Yeah.
doing ML for most of our careers. It's
Yeah.
really the deep learning that's actually transforming what's happening. That's open chat
Yeah.
transform models. That's what's really transforming that model.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly. So in a way, like, isn't that an interesting thing that the engineers who are designing, as a collective, the engineers who are designing these systems are designing the systems to put ourselves out of a job. Like if you are in networking and you're building a piece of technology to basically make the domain expert, a redundant person, like,
but
isn't that? Yeah.
yeah, I mean, we are automating. We are automating certain tasks.
Mhm.
Now, the theory is that, hey, as we start to automate these mundane tasks, like finding the misconfigured router or something,
Yeah.
you know, the IT person can do more things more relevant to the business, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the theory is as we that's the pro theory is, hey guys, as we automate some of these mundane tasks, you
Yeah.
know, humans can do more interesting. The IT guy can go solve more interesting problems that AI is not going to solve.
Yeah.
And I think that's the theory behind, right? AI is not going to replace music, poem.
Yeah.
I don't think AI is going to replace the human. Humans will go find better, more things to do, valuable things to do with their
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. I agree. I think we generally have to forego our passions, like as you said, music and poetry and painting, like that, because we don't have time. We devote our time to building
Eh,
building businesses. But I think I do agree with AI taking over a lot of these things. We will be able to find more time. Do you think things like 4-day work week, or
Yeah.
universal income, universal basic income, do you think these kind of things will come into the picture as AI takes over?
I think universal income is if we get to the point where there's more people than jobs.
Yeah.
Usually, the analogy I usually try to show is like, agriculture, right? If you look at our farming, we used to be a very agricultural society because it used, one farm could support maybe 10, 100 families.
Yeah.
Now one farm can support what, 1 million families, right?
Yeah.
And so we don't need a lot of farmers right now. We need a couple of big farmers, and they basically support the rest of us. Um,
Mhm.
So I think that is what's going to happen, right? If you, in our case, networking, right? It takes a lot of people to support networking.
Yeah.
As we start to automate it to the point where, hey, it takes a couple of people to support the whole network. Where will these people go? Now they'll go off into data center businesses or create new AI programs. That part of the society will be freed up to do something else now.
Yeah.
Same with cars, right? I mean, it used to take a lot of people to build a car. Now we've got down to, a small number of people can supply all the cars we need.
Yeah. So there's a question from the audience here. Will AI push the boundaries of human ingenuity to think more creatively and use our ability to use EQ instead of IQ to solve greater problems?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I'm a big fan of EQ and IQ, and
Mhm.
AI is very good at solving IQ problems, but less good at solving EQ problems.
Yeah.
So I think AI, in the case of, if we even look at open chat right now, it's replacing a lot of copyright, right? It's gotten so good, people are leveraging it to be more creative, right? They're leveraging it to be quicker, right? The copyright industry is basically using, open chat to create the first. It's not the final product, but they're using it to get to a starting point.
Absolutely.
So I like that question, because I think, I mean, it's going to give humans more time to spend on their EQ versus the IQ.
Yeah. Do you think it'll help us increase our creativity as well? Because we've already I believe, like, we obviously we have limits to our intelligence as well. Like, EQ certainly, but even IQ, like, we cannot think beyond certain boundaries.
So if you look at open chat, right? I mean, they have basically taken the internet and stuck it into 175 billion parameter model. There is no way any human can remember all the stuff, So if you look at open chat now, it's basically an assistant, for more creativity, right?
Exactly.
That's so great. I think it's going to help. I think it's going to provide, it's going to introduce people to a lot more knowledge they didn't have, right?
Awesome. Now, getting back to the entrepreneurship realm, so you started the companies and were successful. Now, today, when somebody starts a company, they want to grow. It's a very noisy market. There's so much more competition. So, what is your advice to differentiate themselves, cut through the noise, get heard, or get noticed? Because it's very difficult to break through these days, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think my best story here is at Aerospace. When we started Aerospace, we had a theory about converging cellular and Wi-Fi in the enterprise. We went out and tried to raise money on that theory, and we crashed and burned. Right? We started pitching that story. Now, the lesson there was we almost closed the company down. Right? We got together. We had this, everyone. The VC put us in a room, fed us pizza for 3 days, and said, "Don't come out until you guys agree on your story." At the end of the day, we almost closed the company now, but we decided in that case, the VC took myself and Pat, another guy, and said, "Let's go spend 3 months with customers."
I see.
And that was the key there. Is like, you guys, if you're doing a new venture, you need to make sure that whatever you're thinking actually resonates with real customers, that you have a few customers who share your vision. Now, the other thing I tell young entrepreneurs is don't waste too much time before raising money. Because if you can't raise money, there's probably something wrong with the story. There's something wrong with your, if you can't raise money, because I see a lot of entrepreneurs spend a year or two on trying to get a POC, get some early customers. VCs tell them, sorry, that's just a polite way of a VC telling you no. So if you can't, there's so many VCs. If you can't articulate a story that raises money, then there's something wrong with the story. There's something wrong with the business plan.
Got it. Great. And what about one of the questions that I'd like to ask? What is the role of mentors in your life, in your journey? Like, have you had mentors? What kind of impact did they have in your journey?
Yeah, I've had a couple of mentors in my life. I've had a very good friend that I've started when I started my career out of college. We've worked together back and forth in startups over the last 20, 30 years or so.
Yeah.
I put him in one of my high IQ buckets. Someone I've known
Nice.
for since the beginning.
Mhm.
Someone who I think sees farther into the future than the average person. And I think that's one key of success. Is there's certain people out there who actually, I think, are like chess, right? They can kind of foresee all the different scenarios when you're trying to solve a problem.
Mhm. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I have another VC friend who's kind of my EQ mentor on. He's the one that told me that, hey, if he can learn guitar, anyone can learn guitar.
Mhm.
So it's always good. It's always good to have some EQ mentors in your life to stretch you outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah. That's great. Awesome. This has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much. Now, if people want to connect with you or they want to reach out, what is the best way for them to contact you?
Yeah, the best way for me is just LinkedIn.
Okay,
Bob
sure.
Friday at LinkedIn. Just send me a message. I'm happy to connect with everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We'll put that link in the show notes. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Manu.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bye.